Let's face it, we've had it pretty good in America. After World War II, that was a pretty rough time for everybody after the Great Depression. They were starving in the Great Depression. And then after World War II, they fought a hard battle over in Europe, and America's had it pretty damn good. We've had everything, all the big cars, we had all the gasoline, we had all the factories. After World War II, we had all the factories, and we were living the charmed life, the luck of the Irish, you might say. And there were plenty of Irish in America, so there was plenty of luck to go around. But today, in the modern world we live in, every day we wake up, we hear about something that shocks us. Every day, something more alarming pops up. And today I'm talking about what the German authorities are telling the German people. They're telling them to stock up on food and water. Now, why would the German authorities say that? What do the German authorities know that you and I don't know? Is it something about the euro? Are there bank runs about to happen in Spain or Italy? Look at Greece here. These are the grocery stores in Greece. Now we know that Greece has already had their banking problems for the last couple of years. Oh, everybody thinks that Greece is through their banking crisis. Yes, just go to the local grocery store in Greece and tell me that the crisis is over. Yes, we're talking about capital controls. Once the governments figure out that the people don't trust the money anymore, and they don't really trust the euro anymore, so the people go and they take the money out of the bank, and it's called a bank run, but then the governments have to put capital controls on because the governments are control freaks. So they start limiting the cash withdrawals like they did in Greece. Central powers in the hands of central idiots. Central planning in the hands of central morons. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Germany is a very, very clever, intelligent country. Nobody can ever say that the Germans are stupid. I mean, come on. Who makes the Mercedes-Benz? Trust me. If you want to get a good pair of scissors, a good knife, you go to German technology. Nobody said that the Germans were never that clever. Nobody ever said that because the Germans are extremely clever. So when the German authorities tell the German people, you might want to stock up on food and water, you better get alarmed, and you better get alarmed quickly. But hell, what do I know? I'm just a stupid American living under a Muslim president, getting ready to watch the coronation of the Wicked Witch of Arkansas become the next dictator of what used to be America. I don't know nothing when it comes to world finance. It's too big. It's too big, but I can tell you this. Back in the 1970s, we had it rough back in the 1970s for a little bit. They called it stagflation. And I can tell you this, where I grew up, nobody had any food stamps. Oh, we might have had some poor people. We had a lot of poor people around, but they had too much class and they had too much dignity to accept a handout. There was no food stamps where I come from. No, that was limited to the inner cities where they had riots. Is it a coincidence that in the 1960s, all these people in the inner cities, they were rioting and catching buildings on fire and they were causing trouble? And then all of a sudden in the late 60s, the politicians started up this experimental project called food stamps. Yeah, in the 1960s. Let's give about, 350,000 people or 500,000 people, let's give them some free food and see if that won't settle them down in the inner cities where they didn't have any dignity. So the people in the inner cities, they took that free food because they got no class and they got no dignity. But I can tell you in my neighborhood where I grew up, we weren't going to have none of that, no. We were poor, but we didn't want no handout. We wanted a job, and we worked hard, and we partied hard, and that's how they did it on the Ohio River. But I digress. And then that experimental food stamp program kept on going to the 1970s, and it got bigger. And by the early 1970s, It was about 4 million people on this food stamp program. 4 million people. And then maybe by March of 1970, there's 5 million people on a food stamp program. Like I said, most of them in the inner cities where they got no dignity and they took the free food. But let me tell you today, in the modern world today where we say, oh, we got it so good in America. Hillary Clinton says, you got it so good, people. We're the greatest country in the world where we now almost got 50 million people on a SNAP card program, food stamps. Walmart would literally shut their doors down if the government stopped the EBT program. If the government stopped giving out free food to 50 million Americans, I tell you Walmart would have to shut their doors down. But yet we're the greatest country on the earth. And I'm telling you, 1970, there was about 4 or 5 million people on the food stamp program. It was stagflation everywhere. And now today, almost 50 million food stamp people. They got no class and they got no dignity. Give me the Obama phone. Give me the Obama bucks. Give me the Obama food. What has happened? What has happened? What has happened? Well, this is probably not going to surprise you, but I'll tell you what I think. You see, if you're going to invite millions of third world people into your communities, well, you better expect that your communities are going to start looking like the third world. So yes, that's what's happened to America. We've turned into a third world sewer. But we're not alone. We're not alone in this Western dilemma. It's happening in England. Go to London. Go to some parts of London. Go to some parts of Germany where they also invited with open arms the third world. And what has happened to these great countries like America and England and Germany? They're now starting to look like third world cesspools. And it kind of reminds me of the movie. You've probably heard of that movie. Back in 1973, they had a movie called Soylent Green. Charlton Heston was in it. Edward G. Robinson. And back in 1973, they actually called that movie a fantasy. Yeah. How close are we getting to modern times today? Modern times is actually turning into that nightmare Soylent Green. And back in 1973, when we had stagflation, when we only had about 5 million people on the food stamp program, 5 million people back then, Soylent Green was a fantasy. So I'm here to warn you. I'm here to warn you what happens when you have central planners in charge of your money. You're going to start eating food like this. When you have central power and central planning in the hands of idiots and morons, you're going to start seeing food like this in your grocery stores. You're going to start seeing empty shelves. Oh, the food may not be this color. It may look like that. You don't really know what's in there. It may not be this color. It could be orange. It may even be green for that matter. It could even be Soylent Green. Do you see where I'm going with this? I'm talking about we've turned into a sick country. Do you know what they're doing in the hospices right now? This may surprise you. Remember the movie Soylent Green, where in the end, Edward G. Robinson, he got tired of living. So he went into that place where they just pushed him into the grave real fast. That's what Soylent Green was about. Too many people, not enough food. They're actually doing it today in the hospices. They are now pumping the older people full of drugs so they'll die quicker, they'll dehydrate. This is sickening, it's sad, it's pathetic, but do your researches on the hospices. If you try to take a video camera into the hospices, you'll probably get arrested. They don't want you to know what's happening because we're now turning into Soylent Green, where we send the old people into the hospices and the doctors say, would you like this to be pleasant? Why don't we just pump you full of drugs? Your body will dehydrate, and you'll move on to that next dimension, wherever that is. I'm telling you, this is alarming. Oh, sure, we're going to have a food problem. We already got a food problem. If you don't realize that 50 million Americans live on a SNAP card, if you don't realize if the government stopped being a sugar daddy, if the government ran out of money, 50 million Americans would literally starve to death. Forget about Milwaukee, forget about Dallas, forget about all these other so-called crisis places, because that's going to be a walk in the park. When 50 million Americans have their EBT card canceled, it's going to be a nightmare. So is it any wonder that Germany, the officials, the authorities in Germany, is it any wonder that they tell their people, stockpile a little food and water, because what do they know that you and I don't know? You see, the Germans still have a memory. It turns out that the Germans still have a brain, and it's still fresh in their brains. It's still fresh in their memories, 1920s. Let me tell you a little story about what the Germans already know, but apparently the Americans don't have a clue. So let me share you a little story. This story is famous in Germany. It's famous in the Albert Einstein family also. You see, back in the 1920s, Germany had their little problem called the Weimar crisis. Their currency actually went to zero. And when you ask the Germans who lived through the 1920s Weimar currency collapse, when you ask the Germans who lived through that what was the worst part of their life, if they lived a long life, if they lived through World War I and they lived through World War II, they asked these old Germans, they say, what was the worst part of your life? And they don't say World War I and they don't say World War II. You know what they say? They say that the currency collapse in the 1920s was worse than World War I and World War II put together. Yeah, we're talking about experience. The Germans still have it fresh in their mind what happens when you have central planners in central power. When you have your currency in the hands of central idiots, when your money and your currency is in the hands of central morons, you can literally destroy a country, and that's what they've been through. And I'll tell you one last story about Germany. During that situation, the Albert Einstein family, they were not exempt from what happened. They went through the same situation that all the other German people went through. And Albert Einstein's aunt, she was the last one to figure it out. It really is. Who figures out the truth first? You see, if you're listening to this video, if you're like me and you're searching for the truth, you and I are going to figure out the truth the first. We're going to be at a big advantage because we figured the truth out first. We didn't listen to Obama. We didn't listen to Hillary, because I'll tell you what happened to Albert Einstein's aunt, because she listened to the German authorities back in the 1920s. She believed all their bullshit. She believed that the currency was going to be fine. She was the last one to figure it out. And finally, she looked around the city she lived in Germany, I think it was Berlin, and all the shelves were empty. Every store was completely empty. There was nothing to buy. Isn't that weird? The currency goes to zero and no stores have anything to buy. So she reluctantly went down to the bank and she took out her life savings, and she said, she figured out that her life savings was going to be worthless. Her life savings that she saved her entire life for, she went looking all through Berlin for something to spend her life savings on, but she could not find anything because the whole city of Berlin, every store was bare, the shelves were bare. And finally, Albert Einstein's aunt came to a store, and there in front of the store was something she could buy with her worthless lifetime savings of German marks. And she stood at the store, and outside of the store, there it was a stack of bedpans. And you guessed it, Albert Einstein's aunt, her entire lifetime savings, she spent it on a stack of bedpans because the money was worthless. She didn't want it anymore. And that's what happens when you have faith in the central planners. If you put your faith in the government, you'll be eating this stuff. Like I said, it might not be this color. It might be green. It might be orange. I don't know what color they'll mix that food together. But if you're going to put your hope and your faith in Obama and Hillary, be prepared to be eating something strange if you even find that. You'll have to wait in line to even get your Soylent Green. But I know there'll be people out there who say, oh, bravo von Mueller, that was Germany. That was Germany a long time ago. This is America, and we got Obama taking care of us. Hillary's coming in, and she's going to give us a bunch of free stuff. Come on, Bravo, get with the program. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, I'll leave you with this. You see, back in 1955, I'm sure the people in Las Vegas thought that the Riviera would be standing for a long, long time. You see, life cycles. Life is nothing but a cycle. It's not in a straight line. And what happened in 1920 will happen again. And what goes up must come down, because that's the way the cycles of life work. So if you think all those buildings are going to be standing forever, if you think the governments will be standing forever, think again, because I tell you, in the end, it all comes crashing down sooner or later.